Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University.
My name is Ryan from Michigan, and I teach AP US Government and Politics. My students want to know, what Enlightenment thinkers influenced the ideas in the Declaration?
Welcome back, everyone. We again are joined by Dr. Carice. And in previous episodes, we talk about the Declaration. You've heard terms or you've heard people mentioned like maybe Montesquieu or John Locke. And so today we're really going to look at who were the Enlightenment thinkers that influenced the ideas of the Declaration, because Thomas Jefferson did not just sit down one day and put all of this on a piece of paper. He definitely was somebody who was very thoughtful. He studied a lot. So Dr. Carice, what can you tell us about the Enlightenment thinkers that influenced the ideas in the Declaration?
Thank you, Liz. As I mentioned in other episodes, have the text handy because I'm going to make reference to the text of the Declaration to point out some phrases and words which suggest the influence of a particular philosopher from the Enlightenment period. I'm going to go beyond the Enlightenment to talk about some other influences on the Declaration. So I want to make a general principle first and invoke Abraham Lincoln. Why does this question matter? Who cares what philosophers, which philosophers or ways of thinking or even theologians may have influenced the Declaration of Independence? And again, to invoke Lincoln, Lincoln says there's a philosophy embedded in the Declaration of Independence. This is not a merely revolutionary or merely political document. You don't need to talk about the laws of nature and nature's God, or the unalienable rights of all human beings, and a creator who has endowed all creatures, human creatures, with these unalienable rights. You don't need to do that, Lincoln says, in order to declare independence and keep fighting a war you're already fighting, right? But the Americans decide to do it that way because that's what America means and stands for, these larger philosophical ideas. So then that raises these really big questions. Well, the Declaration has big ideas in it, as we've been talking about, and all of the meanings of the ideas aren't obviously evident when you first read for the 50th time the Declaration, and it raises questions about just what does that word mean, or where did it, that raises the next question, where did it come from maybe, right? So a second big point, we know that the 5 members of the committee in the Second Continental Congress, including the 3 most important who had a hand in the Declaration, are very well educated. And the 2 most important, I'll say, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, are extremely well educated in what's called a liberal arts education, related to the word for liberty, liberal arts, right? Free people, how they should be educated. John Adams at Harvard, Thomas Jefferson at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. So we know they've read a range of philosophers from the Enlightenment period, this modern period in the sort of starting in the late 1600s and going through the 1700s and maybe a bit into the 18th century. We know they read classical Greek and Roman philosophers and also medieval philosophy and thought. We also knew they knew the Bible, they're Protestants, and they know some Christian theology. And they're both educated in the law. John Adams really is a practicing lawyer. Jefferson knowing the law and not ever really practicing it as a profession. I want to suggest all of those are influencing the Declaration of Independence. The most important are the Enlightenment philosophers, and I'll mention a few of them. But it's I want to say more than these Enlightenment thinkers. Another way of putting it is the Enlightenment thinkers that are the most complex are the ones we should be most interested in. The Enlightenment thinkers who mix ideas from seemingly different traditions. So one way of thinking about the Declaration and American political thought generally is to think about the common phrase we use, either or the other common phrase, both and. And I want to say that the Declaration of Independence and the rest of American political thought is complex in its thinking. The Americans are both and kinds of thinkers. We tend not to be. We have the either or kind of thinking, single-minded thinking. It's got to be this way and everything else is completely wrong, or nothing else fits except this. We've got either or thinking in our political life and beyond politics. But American thought tends to be this both and kind of thinking category. So to me, let's start at the beginning with laws of nature and nature's God. To assert that as the foundational principle in the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, to me, suggests awareness of natural law thinking, which extends from Greek and Roman thought through medieval Christian philosophy, say Thomas Aquinas, to the Enlightenment, to Locke, English philosopher writing in the 17th century, and Montesquieu, French philosopher writing in the 18th century, right? They all know of this natural law tradition of thinking. Laws of nature and nature's God is a more rational way of phrasing a divinity as a source of laws. It's less overtly sort of Christian or based on a faith or a revelation that you believe by faith. Laws of nature and nature's God. But if you put it together with the other references to a divinity in the Declaration of Independence, a creator, but also the supreme judge of the world in the final paragraph, and relying on the protection of divine providence, that suggests a broader view of the natural law tradition that's friendlier to Christianity. Okay. So I think that suggests to us we want to be looking to Enlightenment philosophers who are a little more openly friendly to Christianity and incorporate it into their political philosophy. And that's why I'm going to point to the Frenchman Montesquieu. Now, this is an unusual way of thinking. When you ask the question, what Enlightenment thinkers influenced the Declaration of Independence, the first name that comes to everybody's mind, so to speak, is John Locke. Right? Mm-hmm. Because in a way, the opening paragraph, but definitely the second paragraph, right? The individual natural rights equally held in all human beings. Life and liberty, the first two. This is, and a right of revolution, let's not forget, right? A right to overthrow government if it's violating rights. That's John Locke's philosophy in the second treatise of government. Okay? I want to step back and say the four corners of the Declaration of Independence can't be explained. What's in the document as a whole can't be explained only by Locke's philosophy. Am I saying John Locke is not important for the Declaration? No, I am not saying John Locke is not important for the Declaration. Just saying it's Locke plus. It's both and. That's the American way of thinking you see in the Declaration of Independence. So if we have to take the laws of nature's God and a creator and the other two references as important foundations for the view of justice in the Declaration, we're looking to Montesquieu more than to Locke. Montesquieu incorporates Christianity into his account of what a just and decent form of government is, whether it's a constitutional monarchy, a complex monarchy, or it's a republic, democratic republic. It's there in the fabric and the tissue of the main work that Montesquieu writes that's the most important influential work on American thinking from the 1760s onward. It's called The Spirit of Laws. And Christianity is an important part of that book, The Spirit of Laws. Another influence is the Scottish Enlightenment. Lord Kames, Francis Hutcheson, Adam Smith, those are the three I'm going to mention, philosophers of the Scottish Enlightenment. So in an earlier episode, when we talked about self-evident, what that means, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident. Probably Francis Hutcheson is maybe the leading thinker, philosopher that the Americans might have had in mind when invoking that phrase in relation to principles of justice and government. But again, that principle goes way back to classical philosophy and medieval philosophy. So Montesquieu and the Scottish Enlightenment are friendlier to incorporating Christian ideas into the mix with, rational Enlightenment ideas, so to speak, of philosophy about what justice is. Then I also want to mention the Protestant Christian tradition. If you think back to the Mayflower Compact, right, 1620, when the Declaration is being drafted in July of 1770, or June and July of 1776, this is after 150 years of American practice of self-government. And when Alexis de Tocqueville, French philosopher, very influenced by Montesquieu, he comes in around 1830 to visit America, and he's here on the ground for 9 months. He says the Americans have as their first founding the Puritans and the Mayflower Compact and New England government, which blends the spirit of liberty and the spirit of religion. And I think you can see that in the Declaration of Independence, this blending of rational philosophical argument about liberty with Christianity supporting this idea of liberty. So the Mayflower Compact is arguing about how we will govern ourselves by reason as well as Christians under a particular religious belief and tradition. So this is called the covenant tradition in Protestant theology. And so you could see that influencing the Declaration of Independence. It's also part of how you could get pursuit of happiness as one of the three, not exhaustively three, but the three unalienable rights listed, and also sacred honor at the end of the Declaration of Independence. We mutually pledge to each other's not just our lives, not just our fortunes, but our sacred, capital H, honor. Okay, and then again, I don't want to forget Locke, right? Individual equal natural rights, right of revolution. Okay, but I think this document goes beyond social contract to something like compact or covenant thinking as the American flavor of this. So Locke is in the mix, and then finally, I want to mention the common law and the rule of law. We don't think of that as Enlightenment thought, but it's influential in British and Anglo-American thought all the way through the period of Enlightenment and still today, right? As I mentioned in other episodes, the bulk of the Declaration is the list of charges, right? Let facts be submitted to a candid world at the end of the second paragraph. Well, the bulk of the document that follows is a bill of indictment. The king and the parliament have violated this principle of the common law, this principle of the common law, this principle of the common law. Okay. So then I'll finish with this, that Montesquieu, as a philosopher, the scholars have shown he's the single most cited European philosopher from 1760 to 1800, the whole period of the American founding. More than Locke, more than Blackstone, this important English common law jurist, but Blackstone himself is very deeply influenced by Montesquieu. Montesquieu is this both-and kind of thinker. He's this complex kind of thinker. He fits together abstract principles of reason and philosophy with Christianity, with history, with the English common law. He's a big fan of the English common law. Okay? And the common law itself fits together practices of law going back hundreds of years with invocations of Christianity, with ideas of natural law. The common law itself is a complex kind of thinking. So I think Montesquieu and the common law are hugely important for the Declaration of Independence as a whole. They fit in Enlightenment philosophers, including Montesquieu himself, an Enlightenment philosopher, Locke, an Enlightenment philosopher. And that's a controversial argument I'm making, that Locke is not the single most important or influential philosopher for understanding the Declaration of Independence as a whole. But I think it's worth thinking about, that we need to look to Montesquieu and the common law and Protestant covenant theology, Scottish Enlightenment, this range of influences to understand the Declaration of Independence and why it matters.
You've given us a lot to think about, especially considering, the two main authors of the Declaration, how they themselves were influenced, by their time in law, their college education, even their travels, because they both, traveled to France and England, just France. I can't remember.
Liz, I'm not sure if before 1776 either Adams or Jefferson had traveled outside America. I think they may not have. I think their travels may have been in diplomatic service to the United States of America once it's launched as the United States of America.
Well, so John Locke is important, but he's not the only important one when we talk about the Declaration of Independence.
Yes. Yeah. And as we've mentioned in other episodes, it's just another sign of how this document is worth reading carefully and rereading and then joining other people to talk about it, whether it's in a formal class that you're taking for some credit, or it's in a discussion group, or it's in some other way. It helps to have other people to talk with if you're reading and rereading this and then thinking through, what does that phrase mean? And then but how does that idea fit together with this other idea? They seem not to fit together. Just, individual equal natural rights. How does that fit together with sacred honor? And how does that fit together with looking to God as a protector in divine providence, right? If I'm focused on my individual natural rights, how do I fit together that with these larger ideas? Very important to talk through and think through.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. I know we're going to be talking to you in further episodes, so we really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.